Welcome back to the channel. This will be the best team for Matchday 9 in UCL Fantasy, where we have unlimited transfers and several things have changed. There is a 5 million increase to our budget, so that means if you had 102.1 million in terms of squad value, you will now have 107.1 million to spend on your 15-man squad, and we can also pick up to 4 players from the same club as opposed to the usual 3 from the league phase, and this figure will increase later in the competition. If you want all the ins and outs about the rules, then check out my chip strategy guide, which I made earlier in the season, and also my how to play UCL Fantasy video, which I also made a couple of years ago. Smash the like button and subscribe if you're new. If you enjoy my content, our aim is to get this to a 200 likes and to keep on pushing towards new goals like 32,000 subscribers. Check all the links in the description below, which includes my UCL Fantasy League, which you can see on screen. The code is cCaFxb, and there is an auto-join link, so you click it and you're automatically in the FPL Dylan League. Check out my Twitter and Instagram as well, Blue Sky, the Discord server, and much more. Without further ado, let's jump straight into it. My squad value is 107 million, and some of you watching might have even more at your disposal. Others will have maybe less funds to work with, and you'll be struggling to build this exact 15-man squad, but I'll discuss some alternatives as we go along. And because you can now pick up to 4 players from the same team, you might consider a double or triple up defensively, or maybe in the attacking areas and going a bit different, because ultimately the pool of teams is going to be much more limited compared to the league phase. So it's going to be more difficult, I think, to achieve something more unique, and ultimately the template will be stronger for match days 9 and 10. If you're wondering about how transfers work, so you get 2 free transfers in match day 10, which you obviously focus on the teams playing in the knockout playoff rounds. And then for match day 11, we get unlimited transfers yet again, just like we did in match day 1. And of course, as we have right now, so you can really focus your team for the knockout stages by that point of the competition. Then transfers will be very similar to what we had in previous seasons in the knockout stages. But our focus should be on match days 9 and 10, of course, with this 15-man squad. And let's start off with the 2 goalkeepers. Koba was the best goalkeeper in UCL Fantasy last season when Borussia Dortmund reached the Champions League final, but it has been the complete opposite this time round, where Koba's been very underwhelming. He's actually 4.9 million in terms of price at the moment, and he is facing Sporting away, who could be without Gyökeres, amongst other key players like Pedro Gonçalves, and Dortmund would have the advantage if that were to be the case. They've only got 1 injury themselves at the time of this recording, which is on Friday, the 7th of February, and they play on the Tuesday. So what you want to achieve with your goalkeepers is have 1 playing on the Tuesday and then 1 on the Wednesday, and you can sub out the Tuesday goalkeeper if they blank, or if you are really greedy and want even more UCL fantasy points. But I'm not entirely sure about this particular pick, especially if you also want a defender like Schlotterbeck who can get ball recoveries, or Emre Can who was on penalties this season. But I think Koba is still a decent pick, especially if Sporting are missing those key players. But I'm more convinced about the Tuesday pick. I think he's the best goalkeeper if you look at all the Tuesday and Wednesday options, and that's Carnesecchi. I think Atalanta have arguably the best defence left in this competition for the knockout playoff rounds, and he's also got a very enticing fixture against Club Brugge. So I wouldn't mind doubling or tripling up on Atalanta defensively, and for those that maybe want to go for Lookman as well, that would be possible, but it looks like Lookman will be out for a couple of weeks. He will likely miss Game Week 9 and also Match Day 10 as a result, but the focus I think should be on their defenders. There will be some other options offensively I'll discuss later on, but I think Carnesecchi offers brilliant value at 4.5 million. So those are my 2 goalkeepers at the moment. Let me know if you disagree. I think on the 11th, if you want another option, Thibaut Courtois could be one to consider, but he is facing Man City, and Real Madrid have so many injury problems at the back right now. Antonio Rudiger will miss both matches against the Citizens. You might also consider a different option between the sticks like Franco Israel from the same game of Borussia Dortmund versus Sporting, but I would favour Koba at this moment in time. But there are still different ways of covering your defence, not just with the 2 goalkeepers, but also in the defensive line. During the league phase, I haven't discussed Gatti too much, but Juventus have been fairly solid defensively. They lost 2-0 in match day 8, but just beforehand, they kept 3 consecutive clean sheets against Aston Villa, Manchester City, and Club Brugge, and I think Gatti is a nice entry point into that defensive line. You might also consider the infamous Di Gregorio between the sticks, but he was benched in match day 8, and he has been a bit of a fantasy troll this season. But I think 1 Juventus defender is absolutely fine, especially if PSV about one of their key players, Tillman. It looks like he's going to be out for several weeks. Unfortunately, there are quite a lot of injuries flying around, especially to key UCL fantasy assets. But Gatti, I think, is a decent pick in this defensive line with 44 balls recovered so far this season. I'm also going for Hakimi for the attacking potential, and you might want to consider a double up in the PSG defence with Donnarumma in goal, or perhaps going for Hakimi and William Badshaw simultaneously. But Hakimi would be my favourite because he can bomb forward on the right-hand side, he can score goals, create chances, and he's even scored from outside the box this season, which gives you an additional point on top of the goal scored for a defender. There is so much to like with Hakimi, and he can also get some ball recoveries as well. And they're facing Brest, who they're well acquainted with their Ligue 1 matchups this season. I think that could be a fairly tough one, and sometimes when you face a team from the same domestic league in the Champions League, it can be a very difficult game to predict, but PSG would be the heavy favourites. Brest started this season very well in this competition, but then tailed off towards the end, and now they're in this knockout playoff round, but they will be slightly disappointed considering the start they had, winning their first 3 matches in Europe. But let's actually go to another defender, and you might be very surprised about this, but I'm going for Schlotterbeck, and I think he's the best way of covering Borussia Dortmund defensively. But if you don't want Kobel and Schlotterbeck, I completely understand that. Not just in the defensive line could you go for different options, but also between the sticks, of course, and maybe Donnarumma if you've got the funds, and doubling up on PSG defensively, that could be your play, and that's something I'll discuss in future videos and live streams like the team selection podcast coming very soon. But Schlotterbeck was really good for ball recoveries last season, and even in this campaign he's getting some decent returns despite Borussia Dortmund not keeping many clean sheets. So I'm a bit unsure about this particular pick, to be fair. I think Schlotterbeck is fine, but going for Kobel as well, that's something you might want to address in future drafts and also as we approach the deadline stream. And like I said, if you've got the funds, Donnarumma would be my favourite goalkeeper on the Tuesday. Let's now go for a defender I've also got in my UCL Fantasy Team already, in Kim Min-jae, and I think one Bayern Munich defender is absolutely fine to have, and he's got the ball recovery potential, which I've highlighted time after time again for the last year or so. Kim Min-jae has really stepped up this season with some big returns, including a winning goal against Shakhtar Donetsk, I believe, early in the competition. So I do like this Kim Min-jae pick. He's the best Bayern Munich defender. Manuel Neuer between the sticks is another one you might want to go for, and you can pick 4 Bayern Munich players. So Kim Min-jae, Elise, Musiala and Harry Kane is attainable in Matchday 9 and 10, and this will be the case if Bayern Munich progress to the knockout stages as well. But the final defender completes another defensive double-up, and that's going to be Hein from Atalanta. He has 53 points this season, a lot of ball recoveries, but you might want to go for cCaFxb instead. The reason why I'm not mentioning Kolasinac is because he picked up an injury against Barcelona in Matchday 8, and I think it's a hamstring problem, so he could be out for several weeks, and if that's the case, I think the best way to cover Atalanta defensively would be Kolasinac in goal, and then one of Hein or cCaFxb, and I honestly wouldn't mind going for all 3 of them at the same time. You might have been wondering, where are the AC Milan players? Maignan in goal, Theo Hernandez in the defensive line. You might also want to consider them if you want to balance your team a little bit more, but Pulisic is my favourite AC Milan player. In terms of recent form, you might point towards Rafael Leao, and that's a fair shout. And they've also made a few signings in the January transfer market, including Santiago Jimenez up front, who is going to play against his former club Feyenoord. So that's going to be very interesting to say the least. But Pulisic remains my favourite AC Milan attacker. The only concern with him is the injury record, which has been a problem throughout his career during his time at Borussia Dortmund, Chelsea, and the USA national team, and it has been the case with AC Milan, but I think this season he has stayed available for most of it. It's just been the last couple of match days where he has been in and out due to injury, and hopefully he can stay injury-free for the remainder of the season. So that is my pick there in the midfield, and I'm also going for Barcola, who was in my Matchday 1 team, by the way. He was very disappointing at the time, but in the last 3 match days he has rounded off the league phase in style with a fantastic assist against Man City and some very decent returns there. Dembele's got the highest ceiling. He scored a hat-trick in Matchday 8, but I think Barcola is more consistent. He is very young with a lot of potential and he is quite raw, but he's got great dribbling ability. He is rapid as well and can cause any team in the world all sorts of problems. So I think one PSG attacker is certainly reasonable, and Barcola would be my pick right now, but Dembele is the other standout in the midfield. Let's now go to different options in this position, and one of them is going to be Musiala. I think having a Bayern Munich midfielder makes a lot of sense. Whether it's Elise or Musiala, it's up to you. And as I mentioned before, you might want to go for both of them at the same time. I certainly wouldn't mind it. And there was one midfielder who was kind of penciled in for this best team for Matchday 9, but unfortunately, it looks like he'll be out for the next couple of weeks, and that's Lookman, which I did highlight earlier. He was pretty much a lock because I think he's arguably the best midfielder left in terms of the Matchday 9 and 10 available teams and players. He was the very best in this position, in my opinion, so we have to look elsewhere. De Ketelaere up front in the forward positions would be my favourite Atalanta attacker, so if you still want to go for that sort of pick, that could really work out for you. But we've got some big hitters in the front line, which I'll get onto very shortly. But let's complete this midfield with some very decent options still, I have to say. We don't have the usual Rafinhas and Wirtzes of the world, but it's still very solid, and you would expect a lot of returns here. Phil Foden is one of them, and I haven't gone for many Man City players, a bit of a spoiler alert here. I would completely avoid their defensive line. They have been shocking all season, especially since Rodri's injury, and they shipped 5 goals to Arsenal in their recent Premier League game, but they can score goals, and I think Real Madrid versus Man City could be a basketball match. We could see a very high aggregate score, 5-5, 6-5, maybe 7-5, or Madrid completely run away with it, but both teams have their injury problems, Real Madrid especially at the back, and Man City across all positions, but you would expect both teams to create a lot of chances and score plenty of goals, and Foden is in this team to really target that and have that Man City coverage just in case. But a better midfielder from the same matchup would actually be Jude Bellingham, who has been fairly quiet this season compared to the rampant start he had when he first joined Real Madrid, but he has slowly stepped it up actually in recent weeks, showing real consistency with the goals and the assists, and if he continues this form, he might be the very best midfielder in UCL Fantasy. Let's cut to the chase. I'm going for some big hitters up front, and Harry Kane is one of them. He started this season on fire with that 21-point haul in Matchday 1 when I captained him. He has been slightly disappointing since then, but Kane has done really well in the Bundesliga, scoring multiple hat-tricks for the Bavarians, and I would expect him to really put Celtic to the sword across these 2 matches, but this isn't the same Bayern Munich side we've seen under several managers like Julian Nagelsmann, Hansi Flick, who are absolutely ruthless and can score 6-7 past an opponent. They can do it on the odd occasion, mainly in the Bundesliga, but we haven't really seen it too much in the Champions League, with the exception of Matchday 1 against Dynamo Zagreb. So against Celtic, this matchup might be closer than you would expect. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm backing Bayern Munich to win, and they might even do so in Scotland, but I don't think it'll be that easy, especially in the away game for Matchday 9. That's something that I just wanted to highlight because I think over the years you would expect Bayern Munich to wipe the floor with Celtic, and I'm not so sure if that will be the case, but if Bayern Munich score 3 or 4 goals across both matches, I think Harry Kane is very likely to be involved, and that's why I've gone for 3 Bayern Munich players, but not 4. If it was a few years ago, I think 4 would be kind of a lock-in for me, and whilst there's still a possibility, I think 3 is absolutely fine, and you're covering the 3 best with Kane, Musiala, and Kim Min-jae. Next up, though, is the highest scoring forward in UCL Fantasy. I sold him a couple of match days ago, and has been nothing but pain ever since, and that's Guirassy, who has 65 points to his name. He has been very consistent in the Champions League this season. Despite Borussia Dortmund's struggles, he has stepped up time after time again. His penalty record is simply brilliant, and he is by far the best Borussia Dortmund asset across all positions, but particularly in the attacking areas. Gittins is a great talent in the midfield, but he has been very disappointing for me personally in UCL Fantasy, and I've expected much more from him. It has been Guirassy stealing the show, and 100% if you want a Dortmund attacker, go for Guirassy and don't overcomplicate it. But the final player and forward in this team is Vinicius Jr., who is now back from suspension. Now ignore what it says here about me being 1.6 million over budget. That's only for someone who starts UCL Fantasy now and didn't play during the league phase. Like I said before, my squad value is 107 million overall, so I can afford this team, and I'll talk about the captaincy very soon, and the substitution speaks for itself, of course. You start your Tuesday players, and those on the Wednesday you can bench and then bring them on during the substitution window, and that's why you have goalkeepers playing on different days, and you also pick a Tuesday captain first and then go for a Wednesday option if needed. But I'm very happy with this squad and the balance. The only concern, like I said, would be having Kobel and Schlotterbeck, and in that case, if you've got the funds available, I think Donnarumma might be the best one, although PSG themselves aren't great defensively, but Magnan if you want to have that AC Milan defensive coverage, or Theo Hernandez is another way to go. But I'll discuss this in more detail in the team selection video as well, because I'll be looking to use this as a foundation, the best team, and making a few alterations if needed, depending on injury updates, suspensions, and much more that could happen. But of course, the suspensions, that's pretty much set in stone right now. It's all about the injuries and any team news we get over the next couple of days. Now, with the captaincy, on the 11th of February, I'm actually considering going for Vinicius Jr. That is my current play. And on the Wednesday, Harry Kane is my current captain, but that isn't even locked in, to be fair. And you could arguably go for any of these midfielders or forwards, maybe Bellingham on the Tuesday. You might be backing Man City to win or to score many goals, so Phil Foden isn't a bad shout. And you can always go a bit different with the Tuesday captain, and if it goes pretty badly, you've got that Wednesday captain to fall back on. But that's my current plan, Vinicius and Harry Kane as the two captains on each day. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. And like I mentioned before, you'd start Donnarumma, bench Karnasechi, and with the starting 11, you would bench one of Kim Min-jae or Hane, maybe even both of them, and any 12th of the February player. So anyone playing on the Wednesday, that could be Pulisic or Harry Kane, but ensure that every Tuesday player is in your starting 11. If you've got any questions about how UCL Fantasy works, check out my how to play guide or also the chip strategy video. That wraps up another UCL Fantasy video and podcast for the season, this time out of Matchday 9. So just like Matchday 1, and we'll see it very soon for Matchday 11, we have unlimited transfers, so there won't be a best, limitless, and wildcard team video because it's all about the best team you can build with unlimited transfers. But if you want to see a different type of video on the horizon, then let me know. I'm very interested to see your thoughts, not just for Matchday 9, but also the future. The team selection will be headed your way in a couple of days' time. And the same goes for the deadline stream. I haven't missed a single one over the last couple of years. There's the go-to channel for UCL Fantasy and FPL, so stay tuned for all of that content by smashing the like button of this video, getting it to over 200 likes, and subscribing to the channel, hitting that notification bell in the process. And let's try to get towards new goals like 32,000 subscribers, and this video in particular to over 200 likes. Follow me on X and Instagram, DylanRCM, and check all the links in the description below for my Patreon and the championships for early access to my videos, amongst many other perks. The Discord server, UCL Fantasy League, Spotify, and Blue Sky can also be found in the description. And thank you very much for all your support. It's massively appreciated. As always, I'll see you very soon for more UCL Fantasy and FPL content, and I'll see you for that deadline stream on Tuesday.